Hello and welcome back to the Do You podcast. This is your host, Vera. I'm here today with Sam Jordan, and Sam is currently one of my clients. And today we're going to talk about something that I feel like not talked about enough. In general, it's a very touchy subject. So if you have certain feelings about this, maybe this is not an episode to listen. However, I always encourage everybody to open their mind to different opinions, events, experiences, and allow yourself to feel the feelings and see where that takes you. And with that being said, today we're going to talk about suicide and what might have come out of it. So, Sam, can you tell us just a little bit about yourself, a few sentences, like who are you, where did you grow up, and what kind of childhood did you have, like in a few sentences without writing a book?
Oh, the book's coming. So
Which is good.
yeah. So I'm from Colorado, and I say that because geographically I was spending part of my time in Colorado and going to school in California. But when I hear other people talk about their childhood, which I wouldn't want someone to have gone through my childhood necessarily, but at the same time, I'm glad I did, because for lots of reasons, I wouldn't be like talking to you, right now, probably about this subject even. When people talk about their childhood, those childhood memories, the big ones, are all in Colorado, So, but now I am a happy, slightly stressed dog mom of two. And my boyfriend and I are in what I think is a very healthy relationship, which again is kind of a surprise considering how I grew up. We live in Southern California, and I love to hike, which is again how we're talking right now. So shout out to Heather who brought us together. Thank you.
That is a fact. Sam and I actually had a hike together, and that was when we met for the first time. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, who's this girl? And she turned out to be okay.
Oh, well, good. I'm glad. See, I was the opposite. I was like, oh my gosh, like it's the warden. But you were like actually a lot less intimidating in person, but still the same person. So I was, it's like when you meet someone and you hope they're like not a douche. You were not a douche. I actually am glad.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Which, that's kind of like we have been talking about integrity a lot lately in our private coaching program. And that's one of my personal, I don't want to say goals, but just my value is to be on social media just how I am in life and vice versa. And a lot of times we can just get lost just in life in general, because we always choose to share certain things and we choose to share, hold something back. And it's not necessarily like a bad thing. I don't think you should be sharing, or you need to be sharing everything about you, but the values shouldn't change. So, there's a lot of stuff that I perhaps don't share on social media, but it doesn't mean it makes me a different person.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think something that's helped me walk closer to how I picture myself when I am acting with integrity is, if I'm not caught up in the moment, or if I have a moment to like stop before I speak, what is the point of me sharing what I'm about to share? And then I learn like, oh, maybe this is, exactly kind of like where it led us right now. Maybe this is the time to share something that I don't think I should share, or people don't want to hear. I think people not wanting to hear something is not a reason not to share it, but they've also kind of got to be receptive to it too.
Yeah, I agree with that. So back to our topic. So what exactly happened? How old were you? And like what led up to it?
There was a lot of stuff.
Which is usually probably not like, a single event.
Yeah, everyone, and I think that's maybe important for someone who maybe isn't in a place where they even consider suicide or think about suicide, to understand about people that do, is that it's not usually like one terrible event. It was just little things happening over time, and an idea of, as a child, right? we have this glamorous, like naive, I don't want to say naive, but just like this wishful idea of how life is supposed to be. And, the statistics of like the age that suicide starts is staggering to me. It starts, ages 10 and up, which blows my mind.
Which is
But
unbelievable because I have 3 children and my oldest is 10 and my middle one is 8. And
yeah,
knowing that their peers, their ages that have committed suicide, it's just devastating.
yeah. I think in between like 11 and 13 is where the idea of self-harm seemed appealing. But, and again, at that age when there's only, people your age talking about it, it almost has like it puts a glamour around it in a way, because you're not hearing the side that's like, this isn't a good idea, other than that's what your parents say. But how many things do your parents say that you're like,
Well, parents are dumb. Like, come on. What do they know?
I'm glad you said it because I'm not a parent, but I have a feeling my dogs think I'm dumb too, like plenty of the time. So, I wasn't really prepared to make that commitment. I did see it as a commitment. But again, when you feel, for me, I'm not trying to speak for everybody, but for me, it started with feeling alone, feeling different, which now, given the time that's passed, I am so thankful because there are people my age, our age, that are like trying to come back to how I felt. But because, again, no one was talking about it, I felt like I was wrong, so it was just this stretch of, on top of how stressful it is to be a teenager, be growing up, compounded. And I don't know at what time our consciousness really develops and our sense of self really develops. But, if you figure maybe it's like some of my earliest memories are between like 5 and 7. So from ages 5 to 13, that's 8 years. That's like more than half my life. By the time I'm 16, again, it's more than half my life. And all I have to go off of is what life is like for me, what I see life is like for my parents. And somehow, like, there's just this boundary of everybody else that isn't talking about feelings that I'm feeling, even though I'm confident that everyone has moments of depression, anxiety, etc., especially now. And it was just that being alone, and no one could tell me that that's not what life was like, because that's what my experience was. This whole, like, this is my truth movement, I have other things to say about that. But if we're looking at facts, my parents divorced, and I can say that the picture that played out in front of me was not the like parents battling together, for which I am so thankful, because I don't think I could have taken one more thing. But there was mental illness, there was alcoholism, there was like a single dad trying to raise me. Good luck. Right? Like, and I'm in a place where I can feel for him, but at the same time, I'm still a product of the mental battles that he struggled with and didn't get help with, and that we couldn't talk about. And it was so much better to act like this was normal and this was okay. And I think that's really when everything kind of came together. And I was just like, this isn't for me, because all these things that feel so inherently wrong and against the grain of like who I am and what it means to be a person, I don't want it. And that was kind of the short story of how I ended up trying to take
Yeah, and
out.
especially like getting to that conclusion when you were 16 versus when you were like 35.
Mm-hmm.
When you're 35, you're able to process your thoughts, feelings in a different way. And when you're 16, obviously your cortex is not developed yet, not fully developed. And so you're acting on your feelings a lot more, and things feel and seem a lot more extreme. And I mean, the reason I'm saying it, because I know how that feels, because I also tried to commit suicide. But I was a little bit older than you. I want to say I was 22. And so for you, it was a combination of different factors. For me, it was the age when it was over a boy, but the reality, it wasn't over a boy. It's just he showed up in that. Um, but it's just very interesting to me how the decision, the idea of just not being there sounds much better than trying and solve those unsolvable problems, because they do seem unsolvable in a moment.
Well, and I think that was the thing that really like sealed the deal for me, was that I was never afraid to move out of the boxes I was being put in by my peers, by my parents. I was like, well, if I don't fit in, then guess what? I'm going to be really good at not fitting in, So I did not come from money. We did not have money. I was, as much as I don't want to be a parent, someone will call this like a mothering instinct. I think just wanting to take care of myself and provide for the people around me that couldn't do it for themselves. So here you have, a 12, 13-year-old trying to be the parent and like take care of her dad. He's working graveyard, but he comes home and drinks and goes to sleep. And then like I'm making his coffee and waking him up to make sure he doesn't go for work or doesn't end up going late for work. And, like we're living on food stamps, and even the food stamps aren't enough. And he's like, okay, we've got $10. Where do you want to get dinner? Because the food, oh my gosh, just the relationship with food and nutrition in my whole family is a completely different story, and exactly why I'm working with you as a private client. But, like, I'm like, okay, well, all right, we can go here and we can, like go to Carl's Jr. and we can get like 4 burgers for like $5 and still maybe have some money left over, like I'm making those decisions, and I see that my dad is alone, and I'm like trying to be there for him. So I'm like, okay, well, I guess I'll step up, stepping up for me was realizing that there's nothing that I was going to learn in high school that I couldn't learn in college and get credit for in life. So I tested out when I was 15. I started going to community college. I applied for my own financial aid. When I was 16, I was going full-time. I was working full-time. And a few months, 6 months before I ended up trying to take my life, I got kicked out because I needed to shape up. So again, I'm like trying to change the story, and I don't feel like I'm helpless, but then everything and everyone around me sees me doing something about it. And I can't speak for them or what place they were in. I'm not trying to put words in their mouth, but for whatever reason, I got backlash for it. And I'm like, well, now I really don't understand, because I'm doing what I think. And what you told me is good for everybody else to do, but somehow it's not okay when I do it, and I'm not worthy when I do it. And not only that, I'm being rebellious when I'm doing it.
So was it more of a thought through decision, or was it just like more spontaneous thought and you were like, okay, today's the day?
No, I knew. It was leading up to it, and I was trying to find like the perfect time to do it. And
How did you come up with the perfect time?
When enough time had passed where I thought I could do it and no one would care, and that they would be happy and it would be a relief.
Which is crazy that we make these decisions for other people.
Yeah. 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 And, I think the self-harm started because I was pushing the envelope to see like, all the feelings I was feeling were just in this very limited spectrum of emotion, and feeling something else, anything else, like, again, I'm not trying to glamorize it, because it's not glamorous. There are plenty of things you can do to feel adrenaline. There are plenty of things you can do to feel a rush. But for me, that's what self-harm was. And then it became like, well, I'm doing this and nobody knows. They think they know everything about me. They think they're micromanaging me. They think, they know every move I make. And I'm doing something so incredibly obvious and wrong. And nobody knows. And I actually went to a teacher. I love teachers. Thank God for teachers. I went to a teacher when I was like starting to get a little carried away with it. And I was like, because like I said, at that point, I didn't want to die. I was just like trying to like shake things up and get something to change.
What did you talk to the teacher about?
I just showed her what I had done and started crying. She started crying. And then she took me to the counselor, and I know the counselor tried, but my parents were so enraged at what I had done. Like, how can you be mad at me?
Well, because that's exactly what you not want to get in return. Yeah. And again, like, there are a lot of, and I mean, you had a different childhood from mine. We do have a similar story that you have to take care of your dad. You were much younger. I lost my mom when I was 19. So I had to take care of my dad and my little sister. So, I mean, I was at the age where people can do that. So cooking, cleaning, taking care of finances, like all of those things definitely pushed me to grow up a little bit sooner. But I think it's just like there are people that have very, very challenging childhood and have similar struggles to those that didn't have challenging childhood. And a lot of times, I've read and studied a lot on childhood trauma just in the recent past. And to me, it appears, again, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a doctor, I'm more of a casual professional. But to me, it appears that it doesn't matter really what happens to your childhood, but all of us have to deal with the effect of childhood trauma, and everyone has it in one way, sort of shape.
Yeah.
Which is very interesting because as a parent, obviously, I'm trying to create a present for my children that will not leave them with the results of, so much trauma. But it just brings me to understanding that there is probably going to be things that they will look back and they're like, well, mom shouldn't have done it. And so I switched my approach a little bit to just like sharing my faults and sharing that I'm also like, I don't know what I'm doing. And so like being back to your story, and the childhood that you had and things that your parents dealt with, they probably also didn't know shit. And so they did whatever they could do to their best ability, not trying to excuse them, but also understanding that it wasn't probably an intentional harm, And so what they were trying to express when they were being mad, it's probably the only way they knew how to express their feelings, which is obviously sad, but also can't be blamed for.
Yeah, I mean, we're, I think, limited by the resources at our disposal by definition. And I think that's where being willing to grow and also admit that you don't know everything, because you don't, whether you admit it or not, is so important for when things happen. I know for a fact that they were doing the best they thought they could. Even if there was anything malicious that they did do, I think they thought that that served a purpose for the greater good. And the bananas thing is that I realized that the feelings, if we were to like lay them out, that I felt is something that everybody feels. It just may not take that to feel them. I think, we look at abusive situations or dysfunctional families, and, it may take an extreme to pull out an emotion out of me just because the bar was set a little higher. I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but I firmly believe that there's not a single family where children didn't feel the effects of dysfunction because we're all human, and if it wasn't one thing, it would manifest itself in another behavior. But it's still, we all still have the same feelings that we need to learn, how to identify, how to, what actions to take when we feel them, because there's a choice. I had choices, but like, again, I thought I knew everything. I thought I was smarter than
obviously. Yeah.
So I was like, well, I'm best equipped to make the decision for how I feel.
Yeah. So now in the moment, let me ask you, now that you can look back, and obviously, it was a while ago, do you feel that you really wanted to end it all, or did you just desperately want it to be seen and heard, even if you're dead and you don't know?
This, when I was harming myself, it was definitely about getting attention, and my skin crawls to say that, because I didn't think that's what it was at the time, but ultimately it was the only, like, words weren't an option, in more ways than one. And we can talk about that more in depth if you want, but like, I would literally just have periods of being mute. But when it came to suicide, I literally, I thought the world was better. I thought it was just like a win-win for everybody, because I was the reason for my mom's state of mind, my dad's state of mind. I was the one bringing grief on the family. I was the one stressing them out. I was the one that couldn't just do what they were told. And I'm like, well, I don't want to do what you tell me to do. Because again, I just feel something so intrinsically wrong with settling. And I didn't realize that's what it was, but that's really what it was. And I don't want to live like that, but you don't want me to live the way I want to live. So I literally thought I was just doing everybody a favor.
So you really did blame everything on yourself.
Yeah.
You were at fault. Okay. Because in my, in my situation, I, like, now looking back again, like you said, I feel like I cringe when I share that, but I definitely was looking for attention, like 100%. And what it left me with half a broken house and 17 stitches on my wrist. And I wore bracelets for a really long time to cover it up, because I was ashamed, that somebody's going to know, somebody's going to ask me something. And I mean, I don't necessarily like talk about it that much. Like, what am I going to put it on a billboard? You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, I'm just going to advertise
so
it.
Many people do. And that's that's another separation, is that so many people define themselves by the decisions they made when they didn't know what else to do. So I just wanted to throw that out there. I think that's something we share in common, because again, I don't talk. It's only been recently that I've been talking about it. And again, I think at times, who you share it with, looking at you, they could be it could serve a purpose.
Yeah. And I think, again, it depends on where you are in life, because sometimes what it may seem like oversharing or trying to bring attention, maybe the intention there is to share so that maybe you're feeling that way and you will resonate, and you will be like, well, she felt like that, and that didn't work, so maybe I shouldn't do it either. Again, depending on who's reading, who's listening, and there are always going to be, two sides. Yeah, so you can't win, or in my opinion, you always win, regardless of what you do, because it's going to serve some sort of purpose. But didn't bring me any attention that I liked. Did not fix my relationship. Did leave me with a really nice hospital bill. We ended up getting divorced anyway. And it really showed me that that's not something that I want to do to myself or with myself ever again in my life. So did I actually have the intention? Did I have a commitment to fully ended my life? I don't know. Honestly, I don't think so. So, but I'm glad it didn't work out.
Same. I can say that also. And it took a lot of time for me to be able to say that. I was like, I think my literal thoughts were I couldn't even kill myself, right? Well, this isn't for me.
I even failed at this.
Yeah, really. And I was like, well, I guess this isn't for me either. And ever since then, I should say for a very long period of time after that, up until recently, it was just like, well, I'm not good at that, and I'm not good at living around those people. So I guess those options are no longer on the table. And I just lived in fear and spite to put as much distance between everything about that life, including that version of me, and where I could go. And that was like I guess that was the slingshot I needed. It just means that now I'm dealing with that now, but with so many more resources, and trying to do it in a way where, they say hurt people. And I just recently heard someone say heal people. And I think that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah. And I think, yes, hurt people, like, and I mean, again, maybe not necessarily intentionally.
Yeah.
But that's the only option that they know in the moment on how to feel better about themselves when everybody else hurts around them.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of times that we try to fix those people.
Mm-hmm.
And we just need to understand that we can't fix anybody.
Yeah. And I love what you said about either you never win or you always win, because if it didn't work and I'm here now, did what they do really hurt me? Like in the grand scheme of things, did it really hurt me? Because
I mean, you're the only one that can decide, because this is not like, this is more of a decision.
Yeah.
And again, depending on what kind of scale you're putting it on.
Totally. And I think making the decision to decide that, like, it didn't hurt you, and, you're not broken, is very empowering. Because when that's how you define yourself, then what other option do you have than to be hurt and to be broken? Like, you literally make that decision by yourself.
Yeah. And I mean, you just said like a really important word that I have been like thinking about and just using a lot lately when you say empowering, is there are different ways that you can talk to people, communicate to people. And even as a coach, there are a lot of things that I can tell people in different ways. And I've done things different way, and, I talk a lot about the impermanence of life and how everything can end really, really fast and really soon. And so I have heard people say, well, why would you want to scare anybody like that and feel miserable? And my response is always, I don't want to make anybody feel miserable. You're the only one that can make yourself feel miserable if you choose so. But I want to bring this reality of empowerment when you understand that everything is in your hands really immediately right now at this moment. And if that doesn't feel empowering, then I don't know what can.
And to someone that says, why would you want to scare someone? It's only scary, in my opinion, when you don't contemplate it. There are a lot of successful people that are very aware of their mortality without having to be reminded. I think sometimes you get reminded, as I have about this particular topic, but just the impermanence of it all in general. And sometimes you are the reminder. And it shouldn't scare you, because we all know it's going to happen. Like, it's life. By default, there is death at the end, or that's how it ends, but the difference now, when I think about the impermanence of it, is I feel overwhelming waves of gratitude for what I have been able to experience while I've been here. And there might be people that roll their eyes, and there might be people that are like, oh, she's just saying that. But when you felt it, that's what it feels like. And at the same time, it is that fuel that's like, well, what more can I cram in here before that happens? Because it's going to happen anyway, which again is a choice, and however you use it is fine. But if the idea of it scares you, I guess, I don't want to speak in general terms. For me, when the idea of it scares me, it's because I'm settling. I'm scared because I realize that I've left something on the table, and there's actually things that I want before the decision is made for me.
Yeah. And I think in general, like it's going to happen regardless.
Yeah.
And if you feel scared, then you're choosing to live scared for the rest of your life. And again, whether or not you're scared, it's still going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And even like in Buddhism, like a big part of their teachings is you have to think about death 3 times a day, once in the morning, once in the middle of the day, once at the end of night, and not in a way that, oh my God, I'm going to die,
Right.
but just remind yourself that today I'm leaving and one day I'm going to die. And it just like really brings that gratitude back to the level where you can go beyond, I'm grateful for my husband and I'm grateful for having a roof over my head, to just being able to observe like what you actually have in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And the message that I shared yesterday somewhere on social media, where it says, being grateful for what you have right now, because one day you didn't have it and you
Yes.
were literally like hoping to have it one day. And it just shows us that our state of mind changes all the time, and we do get accustomed to certain things. And I know like a lot of it just sounds like a cliche, but once you learn how to experience that, it takes you to a different level. And I mean, like I see a sunrise and I fucking cry every time. And like
Me
it's
too.
just, I'm like, it just like blows my mind. I'm like, how does it happen every day? And I'm like, I'm here to see it. I'm here to witness it. And chances are I'm probably going to be able to do that tomorrow. But if I can't, then I just want to make sure that I remember today's.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you put things like that in perspective, then it just changes so many things in your life.
Yeah.
And when you feel like you're like at the end of the road, then you're like, this is the only decision that I can make to end the struggles for myself and for everybody else. I mean, obviously, you need to reach out, you need to find help, and you need to find resources. But I know that in a moment, you don't want to do that. So, being able to build that skill of practicing gratitude, and perhaps even teaching your children on how to have that skill, because nobody taught us skills of coping, skills of gratitude, skills of, like I wrote yesterday, about just being fucking proud of yourself.
Yeah.
Like I always did everything to make my parents proud, everything. And somebody actually left me a comment. They're like, well, you can't just like let children like make their own decisions and do whatever they want. They need to know that they have to be like decent people and take care of animals. I'm like, yes, a value. It's a value. You take care of animals because that's what you do, not to make mama proud,
Exactly. Yes.
And yeah.
Yeah. Because at that point it becomes contingent, because you're placing the reason for everything you do in something that by definition is going to change. It can change because the person changes, because your relationship with the person changes. It can change because they're not here anymore. And when all the formative things you learn in life about how to have integrity and all these things, be nice to people, be nice to animals, is because it's something your parents told you to do to make them proud. What happens when you don't want to make them proud anymore? And then you just end up being like, who knows what you end up being, because that's where it's tied to. It's not just because the promises you make to yourself matter and you need to keep those, and it's the right thing to do whether anyone's looking at you or not.
Right. Exactly. And again, in general, like a human, we are built to think about ourselves. And again, a lot of times when I'll go back to suicide again, we don't, well, like again, we make decisions for all of those people. We're like, they're going to be better without us. We're not thinking that maybe it's going to make them sad. So the reality is, like, we only care about ourselves in that moment as well. And many people are not going to want to admit it, but it's a fact. You are only thinking about yourself.
Yeah.
And it's not right or wrong. It's just how it is.
Yeah.
So by understanding that and teaching yourself how to ask yourself, who am I really thinking about?
Mm-hmm.
Who do I care about? And extending that to your circle, and
Mhm.
asking yourself, how is this going to serve them?
Mhm.
Perhaps that can help you look at your decision from a different perspective again.
And, sometimes it does go the other way. I have unfortunately seen it as like the ultimate like way of winning an argument. I've seen people do it as like having the last word, and they do know people care about them, but they're so upset with them and they don't know how else to do it. So, you know, or maybe they do, but they just decided to do it like that. Um, but I agree. I think when some when that's like on the table as an option, just a little bit of space in between where you are and making that decision, um, to either think about it yourself or at that point really think about it under supervision, reach out to someone, like you said, like there's resources, there's numbers, like use those. They're there for a reason. Um, but all you need is just like that little bit of time in between acting on it to be able to position it in a different way to where it doesn't actually seem like as good of an option as it was.
Yeah. Which in the end, it all goes back to feelings.
Yeah.
And our problem is how we feel about our feelings, because that's what we take action on. It's not that you're acting and feeling sad. It's that you have certain feelings about feeling sad, and that's what you're acting on, which means if we can separate those two and look at them from, like a 90-degree angle,
Yeah.
then you might actually change your mind. And this is why I say, fuck your feelings. And those are the feelings that I'm talking about, not the initial feeling that we all experience, that we should experience because we're humans. That what separates us from animals is that we have feeling. I don't know. My cat has a lot of feelings too, I think, but I don't know.
And not the feelings about the sunrise. Those are okay feelings too.
No, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Well, Sam, thank you so much for sharing, and thank you so much for talking about this. I think this is important that we can talk about it in, not judgmental way.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people will be like, well, you're selfish. What are you thinking? But also that's not helpful. So.
Totally. Yeah. And thank you for having me. Thank you for trusting me with your platform. You made a difference in my life. I like to think you make a difference in a lot of people's lives. So it's kind of a big deal to be here. So thank you.
Thank you so much for saying that. Thank you again for coming. It was really good time talking. For everybody listening, if you have anything to share, if you have questions, if you don't know who to reach out to, you can absolutely reach out to me and we can talk about it, whether it's a coaching program, whether it's just a helpful word. I do that. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Instagram, and make sure that you share it with anybody who you think can benefit from just listening to a conversation that doesn't make you feel obligated to anything. And I hope you have a good day, and we will see you guys later.